Good morning, everyone. Pam Jacobson, your host of Three Things You Need to Know. Welcome to the program. For those of you that are just joining, we are in week 8 of a series that we started at the beginning of 2021, our Rejuvenate, Rebuild, and Reset series, because we believe that why not? 2021 should be the year that you finally get to a place where you feel like you have optimal health or great health or perfect health, however you want to define that. And I personally think that it's a critical time. We're still in the midst of a pandemic. Many of us are beginning to suffer the effects of the past year and the changes that it's brought into our lives, the additional stress, the physical stressors like sitting all day in front of a computer. We're seeing just an explosion in musculoskeletal problems out there. But we're also seeing huge increases in things like depression and other mental health disorders, disease states, metabolic disorders. So now more than ever, the focus on one's self in terms of health optimization it's always been critical. But it seems to me that not only is it more critical now, but it's likely to become even more so as the months roll on and we start to see the statistics rise in terms of increases in disease states like diabetes and cancers and depression and things like that. So this is a critical time. And my goal really has been from the get-go of this program is to give you all helpful, salient, useful information that you can use to optimize your health. But since the beginning of the year, the focus has really been on what are the things that you can be doing? And I started out the program talking about how do we support your body's own internal cleansing system, your detoxification system, and then moved into each week talking about just things that you can do, right? And there's all kinds of external things that one can do. Move your body, take supplements, eat the right foods. But this week I want to talk about the internal things that you need to do. And I've been touching on this subject a little bit over the last couple of weeks. A couple of weeks ago, I interviewed the woman, Jennifer Tosian, who's responsible for the Subliminal Vision Board app. And we talked a little bit about visioning. And I've started to move into some of the internal processes. But I got to thinking, I've been in practice, in functional medicine practice for quite a long time, almost 20 years now. And prior to that, I was in conventional medicine. So I've been in healthcare my entire career. Most of you are aware of that. And it's what I've discovered, especially in the first decade of the last 20 years, was that I had all of this really great information that I was willing to share with my patients, but only about 20 or 30% of them actually went on to use it and have any level of success in reaching their health optimization goals, which left a huge number of people, 70%, that would go off into the ether and I might never hear from them again, or I might be aware that they didn't or weren't able to implement the things I was discussing. Maybe they circle back around 5 years later and nothing's changed, or they're worse. Their health is worse. Often that happens. And they come back even with a higher level of desperation. And so it caused me to kind of pause and look at what are the things that made the difference between those that were successful and those that were not successful. And it took me this last decade to sort of figure that out and begin to round out my practice a bit so that I could see if I could get those numbers a little bit higher in terms of those that were successful. So there's multiple factors. So there's not just one thing. And they won't be the same factors for every person. So I'm not going to go on record as saying that these are the only reasons. But what I have discovered that are the most common reasons. Number one is having a strong enough why. And I have talked about this. I did a whole program last year on this and gave you a link to an exercise that you could do. But there is no question that when the individual has a strong motivating factor for why they want to go down the path of optimizing their health, because it's work. You have to change habits. You have to do things differently in order to get a different outcome. And there has to be a strong enough motivation, whether that's a recent health diagnosis or a change in your life in some way. You really have to tap into why. Why is it that I'm going to do this? And is it going to be a strong enough why to keep me engaged for long enough to do the work to make the changes? So that's number one, is why. Number two is really being willing to prep and plan for success, right? Success just doesn't happen to you. You have to create the opportunity for it, which when it comes to optimizing your health and prioritizing yourself, you have to plan for that. Otherwise, we fall into default mode and work takes over and family obligations and whatever we've gotten ourselves wrapped up in, those things are always going to take precedence if we don't make an effort to create or to allow ourselves to be the priority and our health optimization and build that into the schedule. So again, I've done extensive discussion and programs in the past about the to-do. How do you do that? What do you write down to brass tacks? I'm going to tell you, like, get out your calendar and do X, Y, Z. So go back and look at that. But there was one area that was a little bit elusive to me, right? I knew that it had to do with feelings and emotions, and I've talked extensively about how the critical nature of measures and just fascinating. But one of the Berkeley, her is in Neff, and she has dedicated the last 20 years of her life to research in the field of self-compassion, or compassion initially and then ultimately self-compassion. I have put her name in the chat area, and I've also put the website for you, because I strongly recommend that once we're all done here, and if this strikes a chord with you, that you go on. It's just a great website with a lot of just freebie information. You could just really get started based on what she describes there. But she does have books and programs and a workbook and all kinds of things that can be helpful. So having said that, all the information you need is there. I'm going to talk about, the title of today's talk was, what's holding you back from being successful? Are you the one holding yourself back? Because what I've discovered, so in the last year, a consulting relationship that I have had for a number of years started to morph into something a little bit different. And I started health coaching. So that's not something that I had done in the past. You would come to me as a client. I would do testing and interviewing and assess what your functional health looked like. And I would send you away with a plan, and we would evaluate. But I would not talk to you every week and coach you through your challenges and hold you accountable. And I actually had people in my office that would do that if you wanted to. But I wasn't up close and personal with the day-to-day implementation of the plan that I had put together. But in this last year, I've had the opportunity to do that through this company that I've been consulting with. And I learned that there was a really important third factor that I could now finally, after listening to Kristen's interview, get my hands around, get my brain around. And that was this area of a lack of self-compassion. What I found in my patients who were, especially those who were struggling with implementing any kind of health optimization plan, was that they did not have an innate sense of compassion for their self, right? These are people who have a lot of negative self-talk. And I want to say that is a high percentage of all of us, guys. It is very common that we are constantly berating, judging ourselves. And some of it may not even be directly conscious, right? It's just something that kind of goes on under the surface. But when I'm coaching with someone and I have an opportunity to talk to them for like an hour every week, I began to recognize it, right? There were a lot of I am statements, right? So I am is a really important lead in to the manifestation of what's going to happen. So I am stupid. I am not worthy. I have no willpower. I am whatever it might be. I'm sick. I'm in pain. I am basically, I am is the powerful manifestation of whatever follows, right? So this is where the idea of like affirmation comes from. When we're affirming something positive, we're building that in to ourselves internally versus affirming a negative. But most of us, our default, especially because our nervous systems tend to be in control of us, is to be negative. And when it comes to self-compassion, it couldn't be more true. So I want to first define compassion, the word compassion. Dr. Neff says that the breakdown of the word, what the true meaning of compassion is to suffer with. So when you are compassionate, you are suffering with the individual. And many of us, all of us, really have a much easier time projecting compassion, right? We can feel the suffering of our friend or our family member or our community or even our world at large, right? Many of us are huge first responders when something big happens, whether it's donating our money or our time. And many of us put everything else first, our friends, our family, our jobs. We have no problem self-sacrificing, right? That is a very common issue. And I want to say that it's one of those top 3 biggies for why we don't see progression in health optimization, because we are very easy to be compassionate externally, but most of us don't even recognize that until we're compassionate internally, until we can give that same thing back to ourselves, we will have a very hard time moving the needle forward in any capacity of our life. But since this program is talking about health and that's my interest, I'm going to kind of keep it focused on health. But essentially, compassion is noticing another's suffering, being moved emotionally, and having feelings for that person in regards to their suffering. This is where we would be, consoling them. We would be not pitying and not judging. We would simply be, I'm here for you. I know this is painful. I know that this is difficult. And then through that, having the realization that it's a shared human experience, right? We all experience suffering, imperfection, failure, right? It's just part of the human condition. It's part of, I believe, what helps us to grow and change and learn and become more is through that. So it's the ability to first recognize the suffering. And most of us are pretty good at doing that with others, right? We can tell when a family member is upset or hurting, or we watch the news, or we hear from a friend that somebody in the community is suffering, and we jump to action on their behalf, even though we don't know them, right? Well, most of us are very quick to do those things, right? Just look at GoFundMe campaigns. You find out that your friend's daughter is suffering with cancer and they're doing a GoFundMe campaign, and you don't know any of those people, but you have compassion for their situation. Maybe you've experienced it. Maybe your child went through something similar, or maybe someone close in your family, and you're very quick to provide your donation or offer some assistance in some other way. So most of us are very good at projecting outward and pretty dismal at projecting it inward. So I want to focus on the importance of the inward projection of compassion, which is defined, or which we call self-compassion. And when it comes to optimizing health, I want you to think of self-compassion this way, right? I am doing these things, this work, to optimize my health because I care about myself. I care about my quality of life. I care about my longevity, my health span, my lifespan. I care about my ability to be able to help others. Okay. That's why I'm optimizing my health, not because I view myself as unworthy or imperfect or ill or broken in some way. And this is a really important distinction. I want you to just spend a couple of seconds letting that soak in, because that's a very different way, right? Most of us come to health optimization, which I believe is a positive way to state what we're doing, right? We're not fixing a broken health situation for somebody. We're optimizing health, right? We're looking at ways that we can optimize the health that someone already has, regardless of where they're at on that scale, right? So health optimization is, and the reason why you would be approaching health optimization and watching these videos and being interested in doing this work is because you deeply care about yourself. And I think that comes back to why. Why do I care about myself, right? I care about myself because I am the hub of my reality. So if I don't care about myself first, I'm going to have a really challenging time being able to do any of the things I want to do in my reality, right? Be the best mother or father, be the best coworker or CEO of my company, be the best just human on the planet. right? All of us want to be our best in whatever capacity. That's just innate. That's just a human, I think, desire for most of us. But if we don't focus on the hub, the place where it all starts, it will be very challenging and not likely to occur, right? If we're not focused inward. So I want you to think about that, right? If you're watching these videos, you're likely wanting at least to be on a journey of health optimization. And we have to start seeing that journey as a true journey to the self, right? To the understanding that I care so much about myself that I absolutely can and will do the work that will move me in the direction that I want to go. And by doing that, I then am my capacity to help others and to have successes in all areas of my life grows. When I approach this from the negative, that I'm somehow broken, I'm sick, I have a cancer diagnosis, somebody help me, then we're looking at that from the standpoint of I am unworthy, I am ill, I am whatever, right? So be very careful about your I am statements. Many of you who I coach and talk to on a regular basis, I could, if I wrote down, through the conversation, I can sometimes come up with 20 I am negative statements that were said during that conversation, right? And I can predict from that how successful someone is going to be at their health optimization journey. And so if we don't back up and really look at the importance of self-compassion and how do we implement that, right? Because it's not, unfortunately, it seems to be very innate and almost automatic for us to be compassionate to others. We're very quick to do that, but it seems as if it is not at all automatic and not at all intuitive for us to be able to direct that inward. So that's what I love about Dr. Neff's work. I mean, she's made her whole life about this. And it started due to some of her own really, difficult initial circumstances, which she talks freely about on the podcast. She also has a TED Talk, and I would highly recommend there's all this like free information, right? You don't have to pay for anything. You can get all of this great information and little pearls and tidbits and ideas where you could get started. So how do you do self-compassion? I mean, what are some of the things that you could start to do right away? Well, I think first recognizing, go back and really look at and think about, just sit for a little bit and think about, why am I on this health optimization journey? Why is this important to me? And am I seeing myself as somehow broken or unworthy, and that's what's driving me? Or am I able to see this as, or believe that I'm doing this because I really care deeply about myself? And if I care deeply about myself, why do I? What does that bring me? What is the advantage? How to do it? Again, I put the selfcompassion.org in the notes here, the chat area. She defines self-compassion very clearly there. But essentially, again, it's recognizing first and foremost when you're suffering. And I think that's a challenge. Most of us have just adapted and we're really quick to just, can't deal with that. I'm not going to think about that. I'm going to insulate. I'm not going to feel anything. And so there are some practices, meditation being one of them, but she makes it very clear in her discussion with Dr. Attia that meditation is not required. So I know I preach meditation a lot. I absolutely think it's a very primary tool in health optimization. However, you don't have to necessarily do meditation in order to become more compassionate to yourself. There are other practices, something called the self-compassion exercise, and she kind of goes into some details about that. But I think it's first recognizing, being able to recognize your suffering, and then being able to move yourself to feeling. And it's basically making statements, seeing yourself as you would your friend, right? So once you recognize suffering in yourself, to be able to put your hand over your heart and talk to yourself as you would your best friend who you can see is suffering, right? Maybe your child is ill and there's nothing that you can do to change their situation, but you're their friend. So you want them to know that you are there for them, that you know that this is hard for them, that you understand that it's challenging and that it's difficult and that you support them, right? That's all self-compassion is. It's not trying to fix something, because most of the time these are not things that can necessarily be fixed right away. But it's more about what you would do if it was your friend. So as soon as you recognize that you're suffering, whether it's true physical suffering, pain, or some other debility that you have, or a diagnosis that you just got, or feelings of anger or anxiety or depression or whatever, as soon as you recognize that, put yourself in the position of, how would I talk to my friend? Instead of judging yourself, oh, Pam, just get on with it. You're so weak, or you're so stupid, or you're so, these are things that we're very quick to think about ourselves, right? We should be a stiff upper lip. I should be able to get through this. I've got all these people depending on me. I can't be imperfect. I'm going to be the first one to admit I'm very imperfect. I on a daily basis have to practice a lot of self-compassion, right? So I think it's first accepting that it's an imperfect world and there is no such thing as perfection, even though many of us are raised to be perfectionists. And that it's all about progress and acceptance, right? I accept that I am not perfect. I accept that it's not important for me to be perfect. I accept that I share with all of the other people on this planet the failures and the imperfections, that I'm not alone, right? So this is really what self-compassion is about, is understanding that these are the things that help us grow, that we accept that this is the reality, that we are understanding of sometimes the feelings and the pain that we have as a result of that, but that we are able to be a support to ourselves as we move through. Because we always, if you look back at your life, you always have moved through the adversity, but you're going to move through faster and in a better way if you're on your own team, right? So this is about getting on your own team and advocating for yourself. So what is self-compassion not, right? It's not self-pity. This is not a pity party. This is not having a discussion, nor is compassion for another person pity for them, right? That's almost a condensation. That's almost looking down on an individual. That's a judgment. It's not self-esteem. So not to be confused with self-esteem, and not to be confused with self-indulgence, right? I think many of us are so quick to give compassion because we see it as the right, ethical, moral thing to do, but so resistant to give ourselves compassion because we feel it's selfish in some way or self-indulgent in some way. So important to understand there's a big difference between self-esteem, self-indulgence, self-pity, and self-compassion. Self-compassion is the positive momentum that can drive you forward. So, it's being able to mindfully accept that we feel a certain way, embrace ourselves, and remember that we're not alone. Those are the three kind of key factors to self-compassion. And I think the most challenging thing is number one, which is to just become aware, right? How do we become more mindful of how we're feeling? Because I know for myself, it's easy for me to skip through the whole day and not allow that in. I don't have time for that. I got stuff to do. I don't want to sit and feel my feelings. That's painful. No, I'm just going to move on from that, right? I think that is an honest assessment of all of you out there, because I know that that's the way I am. And I see it in these, ongoing coaching calls with a multitude of different types of people. So, the couple I talked about, most of you are probably at this point thinking to yourselves, okay, well, that's great, Pam. So what do I do? Well, I think, you have to spend some time perhaps looking at Kristen's website, maybe reading her book. But it really is delving a little bit for yourself, because I do think that each person is going to see and come to self-compassion a little differently. For me, meditation is really important. And so I use that as part of my self-compassion practice. But as Dr. Neff says, meditation is not critical. You can do it through self-compassion. She calls it a self-compassion break, right? So it's taking time out throughout your day. So maybe you set some type of a reminder. I've asked you to do this for all kinds of things, right? Set a reminder every hour to get up out of your chair and to do a little exercise and to take some deep breaths. That same hour reminder could also be a time for you to check in with yourself, to see, how am I feeling? Do I feel anxious? Do I feel sad in some way? Do I feel nervous about something? And being able to direct that compassion inward, putting your hand over your heart and talking to yourself as if you were your own best friend. How would you talk to your best friend if they were feeling that way in the middle of their day? So that's somewhat of an oversimplification. I would really encourage you all to do a little bit of research on your own. It's pretty straightforward. As I said, it's not going to cost you anything, but maybe a little bit of time. But I feel like this came to me because I'm constantly, especially now, looking at how can I help these people that I'm working with be successful. I want that number higher than 30%. I've talked about the importance of why. I've talked about the importance of prep and planning. What's the missing component, right? And I felt like it was meditation, and I'm preaching meditation, which I do believe is a very important tool. So don't get me wrong. But Dr. Neff said a very important thing. She said, the reality is that some people are just never going to do that, and it's just not going to happen. So what do we do in those cases? And this whole discussion of self-compassion was that you can have compassion for yourself, and you can use meditation as a practice to learn how to do that, but you don't have to just do meditation. So important little pearl, something new for me to think about, but please do visit it's self-compassion.org. Like I said, a lot of great info there. She's got a TED Talk that talks about the difference between self-compassion and self-esteem, because there can be a lot of confusion there. And then, like I said, she's written books and she's worked with other researchers. So I think you can find a tremendous amount of information online. But I hope this gave you a pause to think about how you probably are what's standing in, or the way you talk to yourself is what's standing in the way of you moving that needle forward, right? If you're someone who's out there who has tried all these things and you just don't seem to be able to get things going in the direction toward your goals for health optimization, this may be one of those areas that you really need to spend a little bit of time developing a routine around, right? Self-compassion is not going to just automatically happen. Like everything else, you're going to have to create the opportunity for yourself and maybe use some techniques that can help you stay tuned into that. So I hope you found this helpful. It took a little bit of time for this to kind of come into my head. I was like, what's the most important thing for me to talk about? Every week, I want to come to you with information that's going to help you move forward from where you are. And this just kept coming up as something that I believe is a huge sticking point for most of us. So I hope you found it helpful. Have an amazing week, everyone. I will be back with you next Wednesday, 9 a.m. Pacific. Take care.